Every day at Briarwood High, a line of students would file into the cafeteria and shuffle past the aging lunch lady, Ms. Bridgewater. She stood there in her crisp white apron, hairnet pulled so tight that no stray strand of hair could escape. Her face was carved with lines of age and something else, something uneasy. A large sign above the lunch counter listed the rules. Do not add anything to your meal. Never swap portions with others. Finish every bite on your tray. Most people obeyed without question. After all, Ms. Bridgewater had been there since the school first opened, so nobody quite remembered a time without her. Whispers circulated among the students about how her stews never tasted the same from day to day, and how her milk cartons were always slightly colder than normal. But no one dared break the rules, except for Brandon Ridley. Brandon was in his senior year, confident and fearless. He liked testing boundaries and making a spectacle. One rainy Tuesday, Brandon slid his tray along the counter. Miss Bridgewater served him a murky soup with unidentifiable chunks floating within. Alongside it, she placed an odd-looking cornbread muffin, its surface dotted with black seeds. Brandon wrinkled his nose. He could see Miss Bridgewater's sharp eyes peering at him from under her hairnet, but he paid her no mind. He sat with his friends, who were already picking at their own lunches. "Come on, man," one friend urged, nodding at the sign on the wall. "You know the rules." Brandon smirked. "Watch this." He pulled out a packet of hot sauce from his jacket pocket and with a flourish squirted a fiery stream into his soup. Rule number 1 broken. At that moment, Miss Bridgewater's gaze settled on Brandon like a hawk's. She said nothing, but the corners of her mouth curled downward. It was a look that threatened more than any spoken warning ever could. Brandon shrugged off the unease. He slurped the soup. It tasted off, not just from the hot sauce. There was a metallic tang, an undercurrent that he couldn't place. The next day, Brandon felt queasy during class. His stomach churned and twisted. By lunchtime, he was doubled over, sweating. Still, he joined his friends in line. Miss Bridgewater handed him the same murky soup, identical cornbread muffin. Her lip curled slightly. He couldn't stomach it. Halfway through, he shoved the tray away. Rule number 3 broken. That night, thunder cracked the sky. Brandon tossed and turned in bed, feverish. He dreamt of Miss Bridgewater lurking over him, ladling soup into his mouth that burned like acid. Each spoonful felt alive, squirming against his tongue, sliding down his throat. He awoke at 3 a.m., drenched in sweat, convinced he heard a raspy voice whisper, "Finish every bite." At school the next morning, Brandon didn't show up. Whispers filled the cafeteria. Some said he was rushed to the hospital for severe food poisoning. Others claimed he had collapsed in the school parking lot. When the bell rang for first lunch, Ms. Bridgewater remained at her station, ladling soup for the next wave of students. Her eyes scanned the crowd, seeking someone or something. Suddenly, the doors at the far end of the cafeteria slammed open. In limped Brandon, pallid, eyes sunken, his face smeared with an unsettling grin. The chatter evaporated. He walked straight up to Miss Bridgewater's counter, ignoring the worried calls of his friends. "I want more," he said, voice thin, unnatural. She smiled in return, this time with genuine delight. "Of course," she murmured. As Mrs. Bridgewater dished out a heaping portion of soup into his tray, students edged away nervously. Brandon began wolfing it down, gulp after gulp, devouring every last morsel. His body jerked unnaturally, and a low moan escaped his lips. When he finally finished, he dropped the spoon, eyes rolling back. In the stunned silence, Miss Bridgewater leaned close to Brandon's ear. "You follow all my rules from now on, don't you?" she whispered. Brandon nodded slowly. Yes, he croaked, trembling. Behind them, the cafeteria door burst open again. Hospital staff. They rushed toward Brandon, explaining to the onlooking students that Brandon had disappeared from the emergency ward. The lead nurse grabbed him by the arm, but he spun around with surprising strength and hissed, "I have to finish every bite. That's the only way." Then came the twist. Someone shouted from across the cafeteria. "That's not Brandon. Brandon passed away this morning from poisoning." A collective gasp ripped through the room. The nurse, eyes wide with horror, checked Brandon's pulse. There was none. In that heart-stopping moment, Ms. Bridgewater took a step back from the swirling commotion, a faint smile gracing her features. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered, casting shadows across the floor. In a voice scarcely above a whisper, she breathed, "He broke the rules, but he did come back for more." And in the flicker of a single overhead light, both Ms. Bridgewater and the student who wore Brandon's face vanished into thin air, leaving only the cold aroma of murky soup drifting through the cafeteria, a reminder that some rules should never be broken.